Okay, so today we're going to be talking about work in families. Okay, so the first couple things we're going to go over is women in the workforce, how the workforce has changed as women have entered it, and as a result, how families have changed because of the shift from single earner to dual earner families. We're also going to talk about the labor of caring or care work, and what that means and who does care work, and kind of the politics of care work. And then finally, we're going to look at parenting and work and how parenting is affected by work and workplace policies and work-life balance. Okay, so over the past several decades, the rise in women entering the workforce has significantly increased. In 1948, only about 25% of married women with children were in the labor force. However, women entering the labor force dramatically increased after steadily rising in the 1990s, and then it leveled off in the 2000s, and now we're actually seeing a slight decline of married mothers with children in the workforce, but it's only a minor decline. As of 2016, 73% of married women with school-aged children are in the workforce. There are several reasons as to why there was this increase of women in the workforce. First, there was increases in jobs in the service sector, and the service sector consists of workers who provide personal services like education, healthcare, communication, hospitality, entertainment, legal representation, etc., etc. Most of the jobs in the service sector are considered feminine jobs, like being a nurse, secretary, or elementary school teacher. In addition, families were moving from rural areas of America to more urban areas, and as a result, having fewer children. This allowed for women to have more time available that wouldn't be centered on raising children or working on land, so many entered the workforce. As women entered the workforce, there was a shift in dynamics between husbands and wives that led to more companionship marriages, or it shifted from companionship marriages towards more independent marriages. Today, dual earner marriages are really common. As of 2015, 59% of married couples were both in the workforce. Although dual income households are common, men still make a majority of the household income, but this is slowly starting to change as we decrease that wage gap that we see between men and women. Care work is defined as activities in which one partner meets the needs of spouses, partners, children, parents, or others who cannot fully care for themselves. The person who is giving care work is considered the caregiver. Care work can be seen not only in the private sector, but also in the public sector as well, since many people provide care through their jobs, like being nurses, teachers, nannies, hospice care workers, or even daycare workers as well. Care work is often underpaid, undervalued, and often considered more of like a feminine task, which is why we see a lot of women in those types of job roles. On average, people who engage in care work specifically make 26% less than women who work in non-caregiving jobs. Overall, labor that creates public goods like childcare or care work in general is underpaid, which can lead to that free rider problem we discussed back in lecture 1. Although care work is underpaid and underappreciated, many people who work in these fields report being intrinsically motivated to work these jobs and find a lot of personal fulfillment in them. I know for myself, I'm considered an educator, and I really enjoy this job, even though right now as a grad student, we don't get paid that well for it, but I really do just enjoy the work for the work that it is. And a lot of people say the same thing who do these kinds of jobs. But it doesn't mean that they shouldn't get paid well. Just saying. All right. Let's talk about who's doing care work in the home and outside of the home. So we talked a lot about how women often take jobs in the service sector or in care work sectors, but now let's talk a little bit more about what that looks like in the home. So many couples and young adults say that they want to maintain egalitarian relationships when it comes to sharing labor and care in just not only their relationships, but in their homes as well. The term egalitarian doesn't mean that there's a strict 50-50 split in the relationship. or in how work is divided up. Rather, the split is flexible and typically evens out as partners support one another. For example, my husband and I work hard to have an egalitarian marriage in relationship because research shows that these types of relationships are more satisfying and typically last longer. But we also can rarely maintain a 50-50 split of household care and work. Last fall, I was collecting data for 3 different research projects, taking 3 classes and then teaching 2 classes on top of that. So I was basically working and studying nonstop. And as a result, he had to take over a lot of our household duties that we typically try to divide up pretty evenly, but he had to take over a lot of it. Right now, he's in rookie school for his fire department that he just got hired on to, and he lives in another town Monday through Friday for it. So I handle all of the household care so that he can relax on the weekends when he does come home back to Lubbock. So there are times that there is a 50-50 split, but there's also times that 50-50 split isn't technically possible, but eventually that kind of work does even out. And that's what we see a lot in marriages and relationships, is that there's never a 50-50 split. It's just, how can we work together to support one another? And I'll trust that you support me through it. When understanding how labor and care shifts have changed over the years, we can look at time diary studies. These studies found that the care work gap between men and women who are married have really changed over the past several decades. In 1965, women spent six times, sorry, this is going to be a tongue twister for me, 6 times as much time doing household work and childcare work as men. Today, women only do about twice as much care tasks as men do. So it's getting a little bit more evenly split. The primary reason for this shift is because women are in the workforce, and so couples are having to divide more care work evenly between them just because the time constraints are different now. Still, the division of care work is dependent upon jobs. So for example, men typically work longer hours and make more money, which limits their time spent on care work. And as a result, the wife typically will make up the slack. Also, even when they are employed, women will still take what's called the second shift, which is when women come home from work and immediately jump into care work, whether that's taking care of the kids or cleaning up around the house. Today, the split between care work and couples is about 40-60, with men doing 40% of the care work in the home. Okay. Now we're going to move towards like work-life balance, because we can see that there is a struggle to kind of maintain an even balance. A healthy work-life balance is incredibly difficult to maintain. One time I was at a workshop that went over work-life balance, and it was not at all helpful with how to maintain that. Basically, they were like, take care of your mental health, do things with your family. Also, here's 20 things you need to be doing to make sure that you succeed in your career. And there's not enough hours in the day, but figure it out somehow. So work-life balance is always hard to manage. And a lot of families in America struggle with this. Many families experience and report lots of stress when it comes to balancing work and family life, and it can lead to lots of tension and arguments among family members. The way employment is organized provides different challenges for different types of families. Most college-educated, high-level workers tend to receive what's called salary pay, meaning that they receive a fixed sum of money at the end of each pay period, regardless of hours worked. So that's getting $4,000 a month, and in theory you're supposed to be working maybe 40 hours a week, but oftentimes that doesn't always happen. So what happens is employers can easily pressure employees to work longer hours than is contracted, and tend to base raises on people who kind of go above and beyond what is expected of them, so working past that 40-hour work week to try to get potentially a raise later on. And this happens so often in our country that the number of Americans who work 50 hours or more per week is higher than in Canada and then other or most European countries. The addition of technology has also really blurred the lines of hours worked, since many people have email apps on their phone, or are always like have a cell phone nearby on them. Employers expect a quick response regardless of the time of day. That's actually happened to me. I had a student way back in previous semesters who emailed me at 2 a.m. and then wanted a response by 8 a.m. and then was reporting it to my boss by like 8:30 a.m. So that's why I have that policy in my syllabus where I say, hey, I might not be able to answer emails before 9 a.m. or after 5 p.m. and I'm a little bit slower to respond on weekends. But there is that pressure in the work field or in the workforce to always, be responding quickly. And that creates a lot of tension in families, especially when you're technically off the clock. Less educated workers tend to receive hourly pay, and instead of working long hours, they'll often be hired for part-time work, which makes them ineligible for benefits like health insurance. They also have no control over when they'll work or how much they'll work. This is often called normal unpredictability, which can greatly affect families' income and their schedules. So they might not know how much they're going to make that month. They might have an idea, but that could change if someone gets sick or if things aren't working out with childcare. So, or they might have to clock off or call out of work because their child's sick and they don't have care. And a lot of these families struggle with knowing how much they're going to make that month, but also they struggle with potentially getting fired for having to take care of their family, and also not getting enough notice for what their schedule is going to look like. So it's really really a problem for our low income or part-time workers. Okay. Over time, more people have stated that their work life has impacted their family. So in 2014, 48% of married adults with children reported that work interfered with their family life. There are two ways this can happen. The first is task size, which is the sheer size and scope of the demands of the job. This is mainly a problem for people in the professional and managerial roles who don't work long hours. Oftentimes, people who struggle with task size struggle with the amount of effort that they have to put into their job and then come home and are mentally exhausted from the workday. They also struggle with balancing communication and feeling that they need to respond to their job even though they are off the clock. Kind of going back to that conversation of technology and having your phone and having email apps kind of affect your day-to-day life. Another way family life can be affected is through task stress. So task stress is not necessarily correlated with task size. Task stress is more likely to be found among those who work jobs that require less education, who perform physically difficult tasks or dangerous work, or who have little job security. As a result, they tend to bring their stress from work home with them, which is known as spillover. People who experience spillover display less positive emotion, greater negative emotion, and are more likely to report marital distress and divorce. Non-standard working hours like weekend shifts or on-call jobs can also affect childcare, which is often associated with these types of jobs that experience task size or task stress, I should say. And one way that families handle this is by having parents work different shifts, but oftentimes that can also hurt the marital relationship because couples aren't spending time together. They're just kind of clocking in and clocking out at the home, which can really affect the family dynamic. Okay. So, because work-life balance is such a major issue, many employers are trying to work towards a family-responsive workplace, which is a work setting in which the job conditions are designed to allow employees to meet their family responsibilities more easily. This isn't just beneficial for employees, but also for employers as well, who will have more people wanting to work for them or their company, and they'll also retain a lot more of their employees who are already hired, and they'll also have a lot more production value from their employees because they're not as stressed, they're not as anxious, they're not as depressed, or they're not having to they're not having to struggle as much with the work-life balance. It'll be a little bit easier for them to kind of focus on the job when they are on the job. There are a few different ways that employers create family responsive workplaces. The first is through flexi time, which is more common and widely used, one of the most widely used employee benefits. So flexi time allows employees to choose their start and end times for their work hours. So they could start at 8 a.m. after they drop their kids off at school and then clock out at 3 o'clock and then be at their kids' school and pick them up in time, or they can start at 9 a.m., 5 p.m. It's kind of up to them as long as they are doing their contracted hours for the day. So it just depends on when they want to start and stop. It doesn't necessarily increase the amount of time you can spend with your family, but it does allow you more flexibility with childcare. Again, you can be there for school pickups, you can be there for school drop-offs, you can start your workday earlier or clock out, increase more work hours if you want to go to your child's school event, things like that. A common benefit used for parents who need more time with their children is parental leave. Parental leave allows parents to take time off to care for their child while also guaranteeing that they will still have a job by the time they come back to work. In the US, we have the Family and Medical Leave Act, which requires states and federal agencies and companies with 50 or more employees to provide 12 weeks of unpaid labor. The key word, though, with that is unpaid. So no one is getting compensation for their time off, even if it's an emergency or something like that. You're not getting paid for that time. For birth, adoption, foster care, or personal and family illnesses, this is the common reasons people will be able to use FMLA, is what it's commonly called. It's most commonly used for infant care, especially after a woman gives birth. FMLA is there so that she can take time off with her child. Also for the husband, if he or the other spouse, to take some time off to bond with the baby. As we gain more access to technology and connection through tech, many companies are also allowing employees to work from home through telecommuting. And we saw a huge increase in that due to the pandemic. It's becoming much more common to work from home. And it continues to be a really favored option because you get to do the convenience of your home and kind of clock in. You don't have to worry about commuting, things like that. Unfortunately, we again run into the challenge of balancing work and home when your work is at home. And as we wrap up this lecture, we can see that work-life balance is always going to be a struggle for many families, especially as social and cultural expectations for parents shifts as we continue to see the rise in dual income households. But that's kind of our quick lecture on work and families. So I'll see you in lecture 9.